Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, who is under federal investigation for mortgage fraud allegations, is now challenging her termination after she was fired by President Trump. In a statement, a White House spokesperson said, in part, the president exercised his lawful authority to remove a governor on the Federal Board of Governors for cause under 12 U.S.C. 242. The president determined there was cause to remove a governor who was credibly accused of lying in financial documents from a highly sensitive position overseeing financial institutions. Joining us now to discuss this and more money headlines is former White House economic advisor Steve Moore. Steve, good morning to you. And before I get to that story, I got to ask you about that marathon cabinet meeting yesterday. I was there at the White House. The president talked a lot about the economy and trade. Given what Trump said about energy and how energy production is also this major factor, as we know, in inflation, how are you feeling now about inflation long term and whether we could still see some of the impacts of it because of those increased tariffs? I mean, wouldn't this energy sort of surplus that we have now, wouldn't that kind of offset perhaps some concerns about inflation increasing?
I'm paid to worry about inflation because I'm an economist. But look, the inflation rate is down. It's down to about 2.5%. We want it down to 2%, so it's still a little above where we'd like it, Jan, but it has come down. I feel pretty confident that the direction of things overall for the economy is looking excellent. So I do believe that the Fed will cut interest rates in September, and the only question is how much they will cut them by. I think the case is pretty strong for doing that right now, and I think most Americans would agree that little extra stimulus for the economy would be helpful.
All right, let's talk about Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The accusation is she falsified bank documents and property records. You know, she claimed they say 2 residences with the goal of getting better mortgage terms. How hard is this to prove, and what do you think the courts will ultimately do?
Boy, this is a complicated story. I hope we're going to, I thought we were going to talk about something easy like Taylor Swift.
Oh, please.
But listen,
I don't want to talk about that.
This is a serious allegation. As you may recall, Jan, I had been nominated by the president to be on the Federal Reserve Board, so I know a lot about how this process works. And if you have something like this on your record, it is disqualifying. There's no question about it. This mortgage fraud, which this would be, and again, this is only an allegation. We do not have,
correct.
She's not been convicted of anything. But if it is true, she cannot be on the Federal Reserve Board. Remember when we had the 2008 financial crisis, one of the factors that caused that crisis was people had been lying on their mortgage applications, and it caused huge amounts of forfeitures on loans, and it caused the great collapse of the American economy. So this is a serious allegation. And I'll just simply say this. I don't know all the facts. I don't think anyone does. But if it had been me and this allegation had been made against me and I was not guilty of it, I would just come forward and say, look, here are the documents. I didn't do this. And now if she did do it, she should probably have some kind of explanation, like, well, this was a mistake. I made a mistake on my, but she's been indignant about it. She won't give anybody any explanation of what happened, and I think Trump felt that she could not serve on the Federal Reserve Board any longer. I don't know. I'm of mixed minds on it.
Well, you know, if he is successful in removing her, he would soon get that majority of his appointees on there, which would obviously mean a better success of getting the feds to finally lower interest rates. I mean, should board members at the Federal Reserve be serving 14-year terms anyway?
The real question here, and again, this is a tough question for people to think about, is, you know, on the one hand, we do want Federal Reserve Board independence so that the politicians don't control the money supply. On the other hand, the Fed has to be accountable to someone. I mean, the Federal Reserve Board is one of the most powerful institutions in Washington. And, you know, who are they accountable for? And so I do think the president should have the authority to fire the Federal Reserve Board chairman if he doesn't like the job that they're done. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with that, but the question I would pose is, if the president can't get rid of an incompetent Federal Reserve chairman, then who can? They need to be accountable to someone.
Economists say we are going to see a rate cut when the Fed meets in September. Speaking of rate cuts, Steve, so tell me, how much do you think we could see? And also talk about this other big story on the real rate you say we should be cutting, which is on interest on reserves, or IOR?
Yeah, this is, first of all, I don't know. It'll either be a 25 or 50 basis point reduction in the federal funds rate, which is the overnight rate that is charged when banks lend and borrow overnight. That's not a really important interest rate. The important interest rate is that the Federal Reserve Board is paying interest on reserves. In other words, the Federal Reserve is paying banks to just hold on to money and not lend it out. I think that's a bad policy, John, because we want banks to be lending. We want them to be making mortgages. We want them to be making business loans. If they can make more money from the Fed just sitting on them like a hen sitting on an egg, that's not a very good policy. So I think they've got, that rate is right now 4.4%. That's a pretty high interest rate for not lending. Let's lower that rate. If you do that, then that will stimulate more lending by banks, and it'll help the economy. So that's my view on how this should work.
Now, is that something that's being talked about to be lowered as well?
Sorry?
Are they thinking about lowering that as well?
Yes. Yes, there is. If they cut the federal funds rate, they probably will cut the interest on reserves as well. But that has to come down a lot. I mean, you could get more money just holding on to your reserves than even buying a bond. I just don't understand the logic of that. So that interest rate is way too high, and it's hurting the economy that it's paying banks not to lend.
4.4% is really high. All right. Former White House economic advisor Steve Moore, thank you for joining us this morning. Have a good one.
Okay, have a great day.